All logical systems rest on a set of axioms, statements so simple that they are assumed to be true. One's axioms are the basic assumptions of one's worldview, but it is unprovable within the worldview itself. Therefore, they are assumed because there is no way to prove themselves using themselves. A meta-axiom, a term introduced by Christopher Langen, is an axiom that proves itself. But this requires a significantly higher level formulation of logic. It is not what we're talking about at the present moment. The CTMU is constructed using meta-axioms. To minimize the chance of the introduction of falsehood into the basis of our logical system, we should strive to have the fewest and most obvious set of axioms possible. Traditionally, logic rests on at least 6 axioms. The principle of identity, x equals x, a thing equals itself. The principle of the excluded middle, x does not equal not x. Everything is either true or false at a given point in time. The principle of non-contradiction. No statement can be both true and false at the same time. The principle of sufficient reason. Nothing exists, happens, or is true without a cause that can make it so. The principle of commutativity. If all A is B and all B is C, then all A is C. So basically, if something is fully included within one thing, then it is identified with that thing and forms the syntactic covering for any other category in which it happens to fall. So if all A is B and all B is C, then obviously all A has to be C as well, because they're all equal to one another. A equals B equals C, essentially. So if A equals B, then not A equals not B, meaning that if I am a human being, then that which is not a human being is not me. Here is a funny meme. It's a woman. She says, well, if you insist on using logic, I see little point in continuing this argument. So that's pretty much the general attitude towards logic, but we're getting somewhere with our teaching on it. Incompleteness and paradox. You may have heard a number of famous paradoxes. This sentence is false. The statement, this sentence is false, is undecidable because of its form in all of these cases. If the statement is false, it is true because we stated that it was false in the statement. But if the statement is true, then it was false after all, because then we're saying, yeah, it's true. The statement is false. So this basically amounts to a self-contradictory statement, however you resolve it. If the following sentence is true, then the preceding sentence is false. But if the second sentence is true, then the first sentence must be false. But this would make the following sentence false, making the preceding statement true, and so forth. So this is also not something that can be resolved using standard logic. If a barber shaves everyone who shaves himself, does the barber shave himself? This relies on category theory. If a barber shaves himself, then he is in the class of people who the barber doesn't shave. But if the barber does not shave himself, then he must be shaved by the barber, who is himself. So this is a number of the problems with self-reference. These statements are called paradoxical, literally meaning many-opinioned, because there is no definite way to resolve these paradoxes within the confines of standard logic. In modern logic, these statements have a very simple but unsatisfactory answer. Remove them. This was first proposed by 20th century logician and philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. Since truth contains all and only that which is true, and logic is the structure of truth, a statement such as this sentence is false is self-negating and therefore illogical by its very form. Chris Langen says that to solve the liar's paradox, this sentence is false. You simply exclude that kind of sentence from reality. You say, oh, that is a pathological construction that is not instantiated in the terminal domain or the real universe. Because there is nothing to which the statement, this sentence is false, meaningfully refers, it can be excluded from our study of reality and is therefore irrelevant to logic. In 1931, Kurt Gödel proved that logic was incomplete for precisely this nature of self-reference, because in any system of logic, there will always be at least one statement that cannot be proven to be either true or false. Today, logicians accept that paradox is unavoidable and work around it. It is now commonly believed, but notably unproven, that not everything that is true is derivable using any finite set of axioms, and therefore logic, by its very nature, is incomplete. In resolving the Gödel paradox of the incompleteness of logical systems, Christopher Langan introduces the idea of a self-referential logical system that solves paradoxes by being able to generate new axioms as it needs to be complete and consistent. Therefore, truth is not something that is static, that can be described completely at any one point in time, but it is dynamic. It is able to generate its logical structure on the fly according to freely changing internal conditions. Thus, while regular logic is static and thus insufficient to describe reality, CTMU logic, just like the CTMU universe, is dynamic and can adapt its structure to the ever-changing construction of reality and truth. Christopher Langan comments on Gödel's principles called the incompleteness theorem, saying that, quote, Gödel showed in effect that no theory complex enough to describe reality could be both complete and consistent. Reality is constantly giving rise to apparent inconsistencies that it can be characterized as a self-resolving paradox. The CTMU retains the form of the universe's internal logic by relying on the ideas of self-reference and self-resolution for its construction, relying on a small set of self-evident axioms such as reality contains all and only that which is real that are general enough to fit with the changing structure of reality. The CTMU does not allow for self-negation and still excludes self-negating principles like this statement is a lie from its description of reality. But it does not outright reject the idea of self-reference like some modern logicians do. You just can't involve the self-negation part. Consciousness and reality are examples of self-inclusive systems that rely on self-reference. In order to study consciousness, you must use consciousness to study itself. In order to study reality, you have to use reality to study itself. Reality must refer to itself to create and understand and explain, describe its own structure. And consciousness must share in this self-generative structure as being able to process input which is recognizable to it by reality, and thus having and sharing common structure and processing with reality, which is self-referential. So consciousness shares in the self-referentiality / self-generativity of reality. So thus the CTMU, which is the study of consciousness and how it relates to reality, relies on self-reference and self-referential logical systems capable of freely generating new axioms. It thus finally qualifies as a universal logic that is closed, comprehensive, and consistent. Christopher Langan says, quote, the self-referential nature of reality has been thoroughly developed in the theory called the CTMU. Self-reference is something that no conscious being can avoid, as it constitutes the essence of self-awareness. Thus, it can be shown that the CTMU is a metaphysical extension of logic that can take on the structure of reality and truth itself through a system of axiomatic construction called supertautology and self-generativity. This is discussed in detail in our CTMU, A New Kind of Reality Theory, and Mathematical Metaphysics course on how the CTMU extends logical formalisms to accommodate the self-generative and self-referential nature of reality and thus create a true universal / metaphysical logic. So since the CTMU also describes reality as a metaphysical extension of grammar, in particular the mu grammar that defines SCSPL, the self-configuring, self-processing language of reality, we could perhaps characterize the advanced formulation of the CTMU as a metaphysical trivium, a hyper-advanced formulation of grammar, logic, and rhetoric as applied to reality theory. Thank you so much for joining our classes on the first two disciplines. We will now proceed to the final stage of the trivium, rhetoric, the art of persuasion. Thank you. Take care. God bless. I hope to see you in our next set.